the Word of God revealed. Howbeit, when he, the Spirit of truth, is come, he will guide you into all truth. St. John 16:13. At the time of physical as well as mental and spiritual distress in this country and abroad, there was a seeking for divine reality. The philosophies of men were inadequate to cope with humanity's problems. Man had reached his extremity. The people and the world were at a place where nothing short of God could help and lift them. Then came the electrifying words, God is here. And in our day and in our time, they found him, teaching and preaching in the little fishing village of Sayville, Long Island, New York. At his home in Sayville, believers drawn from all walks of life and racial abstractions gathered around the abundant banquet table to fellowship with the living Christ. Never had such words of wisdom and power from the Infinite One fallen on the ears of humanity. The words flowed from his lips in a never-ending stream. Words of life and spirit and love. They were so numerous that the small staff who had voluntarily set about to transcribe them could not keep up with their transcriptions, nor could the press publish them all, and many of these wonderful words have been buried until this very day. Now a larger staff is busy getting them out to the press so the world can benefit. The following are jottings from the early notebook of one transcriber, recorded for the enjoyment and enlightenment of some, and as foundation stones toward a perfect world for others. I thank you, Father. Father Divine's words from the notebook of John Lamb, installment number 8. For several days, notices have been posted in prominent places around town to the effect that a mass meeting of the residents would be held in the courthouse in regard to the, quote, Reverend M.J. Divine and his followers and their continued presence in town, and to devise some means of removing these individuals from our midst, end quote. It became evident, as the time for the meeting drew near, that the courthouse would be too small. So the meeting was transferred to the high school auditorium, which is said to seat 1,000. The meeting was held at 8 o'clock Saturday evening, and about 40 or 50 of us went over from Father's and occupied the best seats. The hall was full when the time came for opening the meeting, and it was evident from the very first that feeling was running high. Many of the businessmen in town spoke vehemently, as well as many of the residents of Macon Street. Some of them threatened that if legal methods failed to oust Father, they would use whatever other methods seemed necessary. There was cheering at this, and the editor of one of the local newspapers got up and suggested that if this were a southern town, they would know how to handle the matter very effectively, referring to a lynching party. Remarks were addressed to those of us who were there from Father's to the effect that we were not taxpayers in town, and that we should go away and leave them in peace. They said we were hanging around for the free meals, and that if Father would stop handing out the best cuts of the turkey to people from New York who wore silks and jewels, his place would soon be deserted, and the crowds from Harlem would soon cease to come. We were not given a chance to say anything, and it seemed likely when they were passing remarks about Father that someone would become excited. But everyone was perfectly poised. It looked as though none of us would get a chance to speak. But I finally got the floor for a minute or two by saying I was a citizen of Sayville through living here 3 months. Many in the crowd yelled that was too long, and the chairman forced me to sit down. There were threatening noises from the back, but when order had finally been restored, I took the floor again with the chairman's permission, and by referring to a published statement that Father would leave Sayville if requested so to do by a majority of the citizens, I was able to speak for a few moments. After that opening, I went on to speak of the value of Father's work. But the moment I started on that, I was booed down again. A debate followed as to whether a vote should be authorized on the question, or whether a committee should be appointed to take whatever action might be necessary. During the argument, another speaker for Father managed to say we were here for his teaching and not for the free eats. And then he was shut up. Finally, a committee was decided upon, and a committee of 75 was chosen and given full power to take any action necessary to have us removed from the town. This committee was to meet Monday evening to come to some decision. Thus the meeting ended, leaving me absolutely amazed at the feeling of the people. I had thought the appearance of Father's representatives would calm them somewhat, for we were as fine a looking crowd as one would see at a symphony or at a high-class drama in New York. There were many truth teachers, a lawyer, several writers, and other professional people in the crowd, but it seemed to pass absolutely unnoticed by the townspeople. They were furious. It was argued that the reputation of the town was being injured by the crowds of people that came, and that its business as a summer resort was dwindling on that account. Other than that, the only complaint was from the surrounding neighbors and the objection that Father had never worked a day since he came to Sayville, but would not tell where he got his money. This was discussed, and it was suggested that some eccentric millionaire had endowed him with all he wanted. We all returned to 72 Macon Street for a late supper, and Father was told, of course, all about it. It was evident that the people meant business and that they meant to do something right away. But Father was just as calm as though nothing had happened, and he kept control of the situation right through while putting our minds at rest as to our safety. Monday. Wild rumors have been flying around about attempts to burn the house down and Ku Klux Klan movements, but everything has been perfectly peaceful and quiet within the kingdom. Things have gone roaring by on the outside. Streams of cars have driven up and down in front of the house, driven into the yard and out again. Reporters have hung around by the dozen, and all kinds of threatening moves have been made by the neighbors. But we have felt perfectly safe and secure in the midst of it all. And Father has reassured us that all who kept their minds stayed on Him instead of the outer turmoil would be unharmed. This has proved true, and I have never known such peace and contentment in my life. Sunday afternoon, Father went away in person and stayed all night. He said he went to New York for a little relaxation. He returned Monday morning, today. This evening at 8 o'clock, a committee of 3, 2 lawyers and a friendly newspaper man, attended the meeting of the committee of 75 representing Father. They returned and joined the late supper table, saying that the committee was absolutely determined that some move be made right away, and they laid the ultimatum and terms before Father. Father again reassured us that everything was in His hand and that nothing could come but what His love allowed. Today, Tuesday, Father's answer is to be placed before the committee, and it is perfectly wonderful to see the way He works. He has drawn out here a leading editor connected with the New York Times. He was with President Wilson at the Peace Conference and served with Roosevelt during his term, so he is well known. He came voluntarily and offered his services in meeting the committee. Father has also drawn out here a representative of Darrow, the famous lawyer in the Alabama fundamentalists case, and his partner, Arthur Garfield Hayes. These gathered together tonight with Father's original representatives and went to the committee meeting. They returned rather early with the news that everything had been settled amicably and that there would be no further trouble. The terms of settlement were not mentioned, as they said Father had something up his sleeve, and we were told not to believe anything the papers said about it. What the papers said was that Father had agreed to leave town before January 1st, and that he expected to locate somewhere here in Suffolk County. Now that all tension has been released, the whole thing seemed like a joke. But it was no joke at the time we were going through it. It is reported that 2 people on Macon Street in different neighboring houses attempted suicide the night after the public mass meeting when the people were so wrought up. One attempt was successful and the other unsuccessful, according to the reports. The reporters say the publicity Father has had in practically all the newspapers of the country would have cost him $500,000 if paid for in the ordinary way. In the meantime, Father's teachings have flowed on just as though nothing were happening. This morning he gave a most wonderful talk about visualizing the Christ and bringing Him to fruition. He said we were not conscious today of having learned our ABCs, but they were part of our subconscious and always there to use when we wanted to use them. But in the first place, they had to be learned and placed there. He said it was the same way with the Christ. We had to keep repeating and insisting on it and visualizing it until it actually became part of our conscious makeup. We had to keep realizing that we were the unadulterated child of God, that God is you and you are God's expression manifested. God is with you and within you. And when you convince yourself to that degree, you will bring into your very personal being, and you, as an individual, will be the identical manifester of God. No man has seen God at any time, but the only begotten of the Father has declared him. And you, as the only begotten of the Father, will declare him and make him manifest unto the world. God's presence and the knowledge of God's presence and the knowledge of God will satisfy your every desire and will set you free from every limitation. Where there is light, there is no darkness. And where there is the presence of God uppermost in your consciousness, there can be no darkness in your mentality and in your environment. For God will be in you in the name of Christ. In that same world that was lost in the darkness of sin, for he was in the world, and the world was made by him, and the world knew him not. Do you not see how marvelous it is to get into the real details, into the real life and teachings of Christ, and express it in simplicity, with unselfish love, and for an unselfish purpose, and only for the common good and the joy of doing good to others, that they may see and know as you do? Now I hope that each and every one of you will realize that, as I have aforesaid, it is not that you must necessarily contact me from a personal standpoint of view, as God is omnipotent, omnipresent, and a present help in every need. When you come to this realization that God is present with you, and when you lift your consciousness to contact the Christ consciousness, and if you will live exactly according to the life and teachings of Jesus as given in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, you will be abundantly blessed and free from all barriers, lacks, wants, and limitations, and you will draw near to the great throne of grace. There was a lady here early this morning. I came out and she spoke to me from the car. She had arrived very early just in order to get a blessing. She had not walked in 18 years without her stick, and she said that as soon as she came here and got on this ground, she put down her stick and walked around. When she came here, because of the criticism, the arguments, and the slander, and because of the crucifixion 1900 years ago, and the crucifixion that would have been, if possible, in this present time, she believed that God was here strenuously, and she walked. And again I say that the spirit of the consciousness of the presence of God is the source of all supply and will satisfy every good desire. By your conscious realization and recognition of God's presence, it will deliver you and free you from every adverse and undesirable condition, and it will not be anything that any man must necessarily do from a personal standpoint of view. But as I say, the spirit of the consciousness of the presence of God is the source of all supply and will satisfy every good desire. It will reach every condition. It will abolish all undesirable conditions and circumstances. It will deliver you from every undesirable expression of life. It will give you joy beyond degrees. And when you realize that the Christ in me is the same Christ that was on Calvary's tree, and that the Christ that is in you is the same one, it will set you free. It is the saving power of God manifested in the name of the Christ. And when you recognize it, he will from all of these undesirable conditions set you free. It is wonderful. Every one of you has the right to claim his rights and press his claim, and to inherit all of the rights and blessings that I this day tell you are in storehouse for you. Every one of you has the right to the tree of life, if he will live according to the teachings of Christ as set forth in the 4 Gospels. If you could die for the truth, it would be better to die fearless. Fear hath torment. There is a story about a man who once was digging for a pot of gold. He knew the exact location of it. All he had to do was to dig in the dark until he reached it. So he started to dig. But before long, he was startled by a huge snake right at the edge of the excavation, and it kept coming towards him. But he would not be disturbed and went on digging, and when the snake came close to him, it proved to be nothing but fog. Then a short time later, a hideous-looking figure appeared, and he was tempted to run since he was miles from any habitation. But he would not be afraid, and he kept right on digging. And when the figure came near, it too vanished before the light of his lantern. All night long he dug, and was visited by one horrible apparition after another. But he would not have his attention drawn from his pot of gold. At last he had reached it, and was just taking out the last few shovelfuls when he looked up and saw a millstone hanging over his head. And thinking it was going to fall on him, he became fearful and jumped. Just at that moment, the pot of gold turned into leaves and pebbles, and he had lost his prize. Such has been the case with thousands of people digging for the spiritual treasures of God's understanding. You get near the goal, and you will let something come and cause you to fear. You lose all that you have. It turns to leaves and pebbles, all because you have forgotten the best. That is, love that casteth out all fear. Be a bold soldier, and care not about the mortal human protection, helps, and aids. For if God is for you, who can be against you? And if God cannot take care of his own life, as was with the body called Jesus, he said, I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it up again. Christ says, I now have power within myself to protect myself and to deliver myself from all hurt, harm, and all danger, for God is in the midst of thee, and is the omnipotent one. There is no other. The all-powerful one, all of the power, whether seen or unseen, realize that God is all, with or without a body, whether in expression of the mind or of the body. Realize that God is all. Aren't you glad that God condescended to hover you? Jerusalem would not, but you will. Aren't you glad? As you would, and as they will, so be it unto you. And verify I these things, hovering them as a hen hovers her brood. And you are protected from the fowler and the snare of the enemy. Nothing shall hurt or harm in all my holy mountain, saith the Lord. My spirit and my mind has control over all spirits and all minds and all emotions. God controls according to his own conscious mentality. That brings the light of perfection that is without condemnation. So you are in a place where there can be no condemnation. You see, the mobile mind and would-be men of science, as well as men and women who have been here daily, of the different professions and classifications, and those that are very material, they can agree with me when I talk from their angle and identical standpoint of view without ridiculing that which they desire to be and desire to have. But if there be an expression in you called a personal desire, not to be or not to have that, then that would throw a claim of condemnation before the individual would be able to contact me in order to get a witness of the Spirit. And therefore it might be caused to be lost and to be cut off possibly. But have thy faith, and have it unto God. Have thy faith in some demonstration and vibration. It may not be essential to express in your language to others who do not understand it, who are not born of your emotional birth. Whatsoever language they speak in, be qualified to speak in their own tongue. The resurrected Christ is qualified to speak in their own tongue. He is qualified to cope with them all. But he would not speak in Hebrew to one who did not know Hebrew. We speak in the language that they understand. So all emotions are words, and they are expressions. Actions speak louder than words, but they speak in their own language to those that are of their own emotional tongue. I am not condemning any emotional manifestation, however. Anger will make you do things that are against your own personal body. But when you come to see normally, the spirit of life will bring happiness. Humanity has been born in this spirit of anger, division, and debauchery that is darkening the whole race. The spirit of war and destruction and all self-destructional tendencies is bringing self-destruction on your own heads. The same mind you have that wants to kill somebody, that same mind wants to kill your body. It is the same one. It is not another. So be not wise in your own concept, but be ignorant enough to know that that mind of hatred is the mind of death. The worst enemy you have is that of your own household, within your own thoughts. So overcome it with good in you and in others, and be the expressed overcomer of that condition in yourself and others. He that conquers his own will is greater than he that taketh a city. And that means that it is your greatest enemy, and it is right in your own household. So overcome that, and you will be able to shout when the world is on fire without mortal fear or mortal tension. This morning, one of the angels told at the table that when she reached her room in New York one evening, she was rather tired and sat down to relax for a short time. Almost immediately she had a vision that she was Father. And this went on for some time until she woke from it and found herself separate. Father replied as follows: when you still your conscious mentality and live unto God, you will be what you say I am. Your vision and your conscious concentration will bring into actuality or into materialization your conviction and conscious realization of being who you say I am. When you still your conscious mentality after having made a complete surrender,
concentration, consecration, and a complete sacrifice, then you will be still consciously in your preconceived expression. Your mortal consciousness will have been stilled, and you will be no more who you think you are, but you will be whom you think I am. Now, I don't want anyone to misunderstand that and think that I am who you say I am, but you will be who you say I am. So that does not prove that I am who you say I am, but it proves that you believe that I am who you say I am, and you believe it so vividly, you gaze upon it so vividly that it tends to reproduce itself in your lives. Now, whether I am what you say I am or not, that is beside the question. You remember the story of the lion-faced boy that was born with a face just like a lion because his mother was supposed to have seen a real lion before he was born. But that does not say that she did actually see a real lion. The materialists refuse to believe that Christ was different from any other man, and they do not believe in his saving power over any other. But you have visualized so vividly and so firmly the Christ here that to you it is true, while to others it is not true. And even the world at large, they believe that you all think it is true, and they believe that many are being healed. But as they say, they could not be healed because they do not believe. So you see, that is the idea. It is according to one's faith and one's consecration, according to one's sacrifice that he makes and his stressful believing. You must believe stressfully enough to arouse your internal nature to a high pitch to make the mental and spiritual conception in your nature to produce the actuality of this on the material plane. That is why gestures and suggestions are so often essential, that these gestures and suggestions may be stressfully implanted in the soil of your soul and upon your mind, that your mind might conceive them. For unless some stress is made in words, deeds, and actions, it would not take on the average soul or mind. But to make these gestures and suggestions and stressful affirmations and declarations, etc., it will pierce the hardest and most rebellious mind, and it will penetrate into it when these are stressfully employed or imputed unto you. So that is the thought. Then if you only slightly believe, it will contact the slightest belief and will, no doubt, penetrate that belief and will cause that belief to be impregnated with your belief. And that belief, through that conception, will take form. It is wonderful. So it is a great thing to believe in things that are good, for whether they are true or not, it tends to be true to those that believe stressfully and enthusiastically enough. So as I say, whether you are me or not, whether I am who you say I am or not, it makes no difference. But if you believe stressfully and enthusiastically, your belief contacting your inmost nature will conceive the idea that I am what I am and that I am there, producing and reproducing myself, creating and recreating myself there according to your faith, relaxation, consecration, and sacrifice. So you plainly see it is good for one to have a sample and an example to go by. The sample and the example is not always that which will be. The grain of corn that is planted is not the corn that will be, but it is a seed idea. That is why it is called seed corn. Mankind places the idea of the future corn in that grain of corn and in all which he plants. and so he calls it a seed. He has the idea that it is the kind of corn that he desires to bring forth, and because that idea is there, it is a seed idea expressed in the likeness of that which he desires, and that seed idea is planted. And when you plant it, you are believing that it will produce fruit after its own kind according to the idea you have of its kind. And so it is with you in spirit and mind. So again I say, whether I am anything or nothing, whatsoever you see me to be, that is what you are. When you shall have relaxed your conscious mentality, when you have stilled your conscious mind, then you will be that which you have gazed upon and attracted to yourself. It is wonderful. Following the above talk, Father said that many had been ready and willing at first contact to see him as we do. But after a time, their prejudices crept in. They expected to see God in a certain form, or expected him to act in such and such a way, or he must come after such and such a fashion. He continued as follows, but there are a few that are faithful to the call. Your heart is not the only one that I have touched or that I have snatched. I have drawn thousands of hearts where the bodies rebelled, and thousands have been cut off from the stage of activity because of their unwillingness to sacrifice all for the great cause of truth. They shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. This was Father's reply when one of the students from New York was telling of what people had said to her and about her. He continued, and that means all manner of evil. They will say everything that the human mind can think. You must be qualified to rejoice in it. You have not heard it say all of these things yet. All things that you know substantially well are not so. You should rejoice and be exceedingly glad. You must be qualified to rejoice. There is a certain element, if taken out of the slums, no matter what you do for them, if they cannot get a chance to do what they want to do, they will say anything. This student was a social worker. If anything can keep anyone away from me, why then they should be away. If anything can disturb them, why, they are not ready. You must get to that place where you are case-hardened and nothing anybody can say, good, bad, or indifferent, will make you feel any better or any worse. It matters not what anyone may say. It would not be a surprise to you. No matter what they say in blessing or praise, it would not need to lift you up. Then your life is hid with Christ in God. If anything can add to your happiness, then you need to get to the place where nothing can take from your happiness. Get to that place where you are locked in from uprisings, sorrow, misery, or woe. Get that far, and you are locked in the consciousness of God. Just as Mr. Lanyon said, it did not seem strange to me. Everything just seemed like a matter of course. Well, it is not strange, for what can add to my happiness? whether I'm acting it or not. If you are where something can make you happy by the expression of some particular thing, why then you are at the place where something can make you unhappy. You may enjoy what someone says, but remember, someone else has something negative to say. If something someone says about you can make you happy, why then you are in danger of something someone says about you in the negative. Be happy even if the world burns down and you are all right. Just get to that place and be perfectly closed in by the universal mind substance, perfectly happy, undisturbed, and unmoved. And you are in that place then where you are safe. Material things and visible expressions should never be able to move you, for if they can move you one way, they can move you another. It is wonderful. You see, it is just that way. Anytime you are anxious, it is just like some of the angels. When I condescended to allow them, newspaper men, to take a picture of the dining room, some were all lighted up. But that was mortal happiness. When it came out in the paper the next week and they had me unfavorably connected with that manslaughter case, it made them unhappy. Now, if they had not bothered about it and not tried to get someone to give honor, they would not have been moved. If you try to get protection, why sometime you will get destruction also. That is my real state of consciousness where I am living all the time. I have not tried to get anyone to take a picture, but when they insisted, I let them take a picture for their own satisfaction. Then my students and co-workers, they thought it was wonderful, but the reverse is equally true. There is a positive and a negative to everything. When you declare the positive, you get the negative too. That is a law. So look out for it. Turn neither to the right nor to the left, either to seek praise or honor or thanksgiving or anything of that kind, but to give it. It is wonderful. Anytime you seek anything one way, you know that it has its opposite. While it may come to you one way, still the reverse is equally true. A good place to be is to be undisturbed and unmoved to the right or to the left, and you will be perfectly happy and contented. I thank you, Father. Published in the Suffolk Citizen, Sayville, Long Island, New York, October 16, 1931, a letter from one of Reverend Divine's disciples. The Suffolk Citizen, Sayville, Long Island, New York. Gentlemen, I believe many of your subscribers and readers would be interested to know that the work which is carried on by the Reverend M.J. Divine here in Sayville is not restricted to this town, but that it reaches out into many other parts of this country and across the sea to Europe, Asia, and Africa. Various representatives are in the field now carrying Father Divine's message to the world, and others are going out from here continuously imbued with the spirit of his teaching to tell others about the wonderful thing they have found in Sayville. It has been my great privilege, and that of my wife, to have a part in carrying this good news. As you will see from the enclosed printed announcement, I lectured in London, England, on Father Divine's message for a period of 6 weeks last June and July. The International New Thought Alliance in London, one of the largest centers in the world, was glad to throw open its doors to a representative of Father Divine, and the message was so enthusiastically received by capacity audiences, and the benefits received by many were so great that a further series of lectures was requested. The people were so eager to hear of Father that during our entire stay in London, Mrs. Matthews and myself were deluged with invitations and requests for personal interviews to such an extent that our time was not our own. This demand is now being met by a widely known international lecturer and author, Mr. Walter C. Lanyon, and that is my real reason for writing you. I have just secured from Father Divine's secretary, before it went to the files, a letter from Mr. Lanyon telling Father personally about his work in London. And since Mr. Lanyon is so well known in New York City and throughout this country, I thought it might be of interest to your readers, and that his schedule of lectures, if published, might catch the eye of some reader who would be in London during October, so that he would have an opportunity of verifying for himself the familiarity of the name Father Divine and Sayville in London. I have known Mr. Lanyon personally for many years, and he has been considered by many the foremost lecturer in this country on spiritual, scientific subjects. He has lectured in New York before large crowds that came day in and day out for weeks in midsummer, when ordinarily it is difficult to get audiences together. He has lectured in most of the large cities in the United States and has made at least one round-the-world lecture tour. He is the author of various books, which many people use as daily guides in their lives. He has been most successful, and last year had reached the apex of his career as an intellectual celebrity. Shortly after that time, he came in contact with Father Divine and his teaching, and since then he has been carrying Father's message across the sea. Last spring, after an introductory series of lectures in London, he made a tour through Spain and North Africa and returned to London while I was there. The demand was such that we both lectured there at the same time and in various surrounding towns. Many times, although we were in the same vicinity, we were too thoroughly occupied to contact one another. But Mr. Lanyon, Mrs. Matthews, and I later made a trip together into France and Germany. When we returned to America last month, Mr. Lanyon stayed in Germany to do some work there and has now returned to London again to continue. I am sure this letter from Mr. Lanyon would be interesting, as I say, to many, even to those who know little of Father Divine's work, as it gives some idea of what that work is. If you see fit to publish it, together with any part of my letter to you, I would thank you to preserve Mr. Lanyon's letter for me so that I may return it to Father Divine's secretary intact for her files. Yours very truly, J.M. Matthews, 37 Macon Street, Sayville, Long Island, New York. From Walter Lanyon. Peace, Father. The wonderful letter which came yesterday was so full of light that it made me see things I had only dreamed of before. You should see your angels over here unfolding before the gracious spirit of your teaching. They are learning to get rid of the nasty personality which has intruded itself so long. They rise and call it wonderful, and they speak in sure terms of the glorious accomplishment of the power as shown forth by you. It is wonderful, Father. Heaven and earth are full of thee. I should like to talk to you about certain things that have happened. They are too wonderful to put down on paper. But then, I, in reality, have talked it all over with you, and you know all about it anyway. My lectures have been of such a nature that the power has almost been visible. Something like the glorious thing I recognized when I came to you. You remember how dumb I was. I was so filled with amazement that although I had lectured to capacity crowds for years, I was just plain dumb with the wonder of the revelation you gave to me. I only had about 3 or 4 hours with you, but that was enough to change everything in my life and open the doors of the heaven that Jesus spoke of as here and now. I know what it was. I lost my personality. It fell off of me like an old rag. It just wasn't the same anymore. I wish all the seekers after the light that come to you could leave their nasty personalities on the dump heap. The personality gets so swollen with pride, and it wants to tell of its good works, and it wants credit for everything that it ever did. Holier than thou, it points its finger of scorn at everything or everybody who does not fall down and worship it. And finally, it assumes the noble role of official stone caster. But eventually it has to hear the command, "He that is without sin, let him cast the first stone." Every Judas has to spend his or her 30 pieces of silver that they have gained by their jealousy. It draws heavy interest. How they can come to you and not drop off the personality and come out into the glorious sons of the living God is more than I can see. I understand now why you said to me over and over again, "It is not necessary to contact me personally." I know now what the lesson was that you were giving me. Blessings, Father. It is wonderful. Yes, Father, the blind see, the lame walk, and the dumb speak. All these things take place, and greater even than this is the insight that comes to the new old consciousness of the I Am. Truly, Father, all things are possible and probable to the person who has gotten rid of the personality. It is wonderful. I am giving 40 lectures this month to great masses of people who come now to hear about the word from you, and not to a personality or teacher. They are beginning to say, "Thank you, Father," and are bursting out with, "It is wonderful." Believe me, Father, the people have been starved for the word of the living God. They have been satiated with the personal teaching and the swollen personalities that have tried to put themselves over on them. If Jesus would not allow himself to be called good, what is it that makes these personalities try to fill that place? Call not me good. One who has sent me into expression, he is the only good. Sometimes I feel your cooperation very plainly, and of course, the glorious joy and blessings of the angels is always appreciated. Everything that you told me has worked out into expression. I don't want to go on too long, Father, but I want to tell you how amazed I was that you paid no attention to anything that happened at your table. And finally, I knew why. It was because to you it was and is perfectly natural for the power of God to manifest. And so you are divinely indifferent. That helped me so much. It made me firm in the recognition that good is the natural state of things, and the action of the laws of God should not seem strange or unusual, but divinely natural. Blessings and love to you and Mother and the angels. Sing a little song for me. Love, Walter. 44 Leland Road, Lee, SE 12, London, England, October 2nd, 1931. Postscript. Father, a growth on a woman's neck just disappeared all of a sudden, so completely that she didn't know for sure whether she had even had it, although it had been there for years. Years in the human way are nothing in the divine. N.B. I have lovely lecture work planned all over Europe. It is wonderful. A lot of wonderful things have happened, but they will keep. Walter C. Lanyon thanks Father for his blessings. California, March 21st, 1957. Dear Father, I have been thinking of you much these days, have recalled many wonderful laws you gave to the world, and how true and wonderful they all are. I hear the echo of your voice so often when I move about speaking the word, and so I just wanted to write you and say thanks, and thanks again. Now you are entering into a new phase of it all, where even greater light shall be given. It is wonderful. Bless you always. A rich reward is yours. Walter C. Lanyon. Postscript. As I went to fold the letter, it seemed I was impressed to say to you that you are coming out into a very definite expression again, only greater than before. Bless you always. W.C.L. Father replies, millions who have walked in darkness behold the light. Peace. 764-772 Broad Street, Philadelphia, 46, Pennsylvania, March 28, 1957, AD-FD. Mr. Walter C. Lanyon, California. My dear Mr. Lanyon, thank you for your letter of the 21st postmark, and I am glad to hear from you. As I was just speaking about you to some of my staff the other day, you were obliged to get in touch with me. For when my spirit calls anyone into consideration, if the individual is in harmony with me and in tune with my mind, he or she will respond immediately. Therefore, by your instant reaction to the thoughts of my mind, I weigh the spiritual progress you are making. It is true, as you say, this is the day in which a greater unfoldment of expression is being made, and millions who have walked in darkness shall behold the light. They are coming from the north, south, east, and west, up to the mount of the house of the Lord, and I am writing my laws in their inward parts, and engraving it on their hearts. Men shall no longer walk in ignorance and superstition as they have done. For in this new dispensation the light of liberty is shining, and they shall be partakers of the freedom of the Son of God, as heirs and joint heirs with him. Thus I rejoice to know that you have kept the faith and are walking in the light as it is revealed to you. For I desire that you might be, even as this leaves me, as I am, well, healthy, joyful, peaceful, lively, loving, successful, prosperous, and happy, in spirit, body, and mind, and in every organ, muscle, sinew, joint, limb, vein, and bone, and even in every atom, fiber, and cell of my bodily form. Respectfully and sincere I am, Reverend M.J. Devine, M.S.D., D.D., better known as Father Divine.
I thank you, Father,